Hello, is this thing on? Let's see. I guess not. Well, that's sad. This isn't working. Oh, I know why. Okay, so it is streaming. It's not going to... Alright, online. So yay. It's hard to tell where this is actually going to. Weird. Alright, so does it say... Oh, it is... Okay, it's live on... Okay, I'm gonna try to look out for my comments, but I figured I'd just do like a little live stream and just say hi, See if I can change my personhood here. There we go. Yeah. Hello and good morning. Thought I'd just pull up Udemy. Start doing some studying. Whoa. Put myself off to the side. And see what this is. I guess my TikTok stream isn't working at all. I just woke up a little while ago. Decided to do a little bit of Windows troubleshooting. So let's play that. Woo! Understanding Bitlocker. Alright, well, how much can you encrypt? A lot. Oh, a lot. Should we make this, how big can we make this? I guess this big? Alright, cool. I'm gonna go over to this side. Put myself over here. Shoot, it didn't work on TikTok. That's so sad. Anyway, okay. So let's
Again,
give
it tells us
this a
that
watch.
it is on. You might see other options here, of course, off or encrypting. Another choice that, another option that you would see here. You can turn it off at this point if you do not want Bitlocker enabled on your system anymore. Now, when you go to enable Bitlocker, something that's going to help us get into this drive, if we have an odd occurrence happen, is that you will have a recovery key generated. Every implementation of Bitlocker is going to have a unique 48-character recovery password that will be generated for this encryption process. So when you run the wizard to do the encryption, you want to make sure that we save that file someplace. In your organization, a lot of capabilities are available to store that information in Active Directory. You can enable the storing of the recovery drive encryption information inside of Active Directory. And also, in your newer environments in 2012 and so on, you're going to have the opportunity to do a network unlock as well. So if your machine is domain joined, while it connects to the network, you can actually use that process to do a download of the recovery key and decrypt that drive. So you won't need to have a specific password that you would type in. So in this scenario, we've already got the drive encrypted. I'll show you what the recovery key looks like. I've already saved this. I've got a network location here that I've already mapped to be able to get to this here. Now in this particular screen, I've got a couple recovery keys that are here. Now that's something else to keep in mind, that every recovery key is going to have its own unique password for it. So in this scenario, I want to take a look at, well, in this case, my date modified. I've got one set up for a more current version of my recovery. I've seen that happen when you've had to have machines re-imaged, where you have a new image of Windows 10 put onto a machine and you have to re-enable Bitlocker again. You're not going to want to you don't want to reuse the same key from the previous installation. So if I open this file up, it is just a regular text file. The important information I want in here, of course, is the identifier, which will tell me exactly which edition of the Bitlocker encryption process this is for, as well as my 48-character password right down below, which I might need at some point in the future. Let's take a look and see what this is going to look like when we reboot a system that has Bitlocker enabled on it. One of the other things Bitlocker is going to do for us, specifically when we have a TPM chip in the system, it's going to also protect the integrity of the boot system. What I mean by that is it's going to enable a date and time signature stamp on those system files, write that information into the TPM chip to verify that nothing's changed those files,
So that's
either
like
from
a T1
malware,
or T2
rootkits, or
chip on a
anything
Mac.
like that. So it protects the integrity. And if anything comes up during that process that tries to intercede in the boot process, the system will recognize it and automatically go into what's called recovery mode. Now at this point, this is where you normally would type in your password to get into the drive. Now if the user does not remember what their password is, or maybe this system required a USB stick, right, enabled to plug in order to decrypt the drive, because that's the recovery file is there. And I've seen that before, where users have just either lost their USB stick or they might have forgotten it at home. I've needed to have the recovery key information to populate into this window here. So you could see how that would work. I could show you what you'd end up doing here. That would be a fun exercise at this point. But in reality, what we want to do is make sure we have access to the recovery key. In this case, again, I do have my most recent version here. I've stored this somewhere else, again, off of the client machine. It's a great idea to do. In this case, here is my recovery key for this particular installation. Now, what I'm looking for in this case, let me go back to the client machine. Let's say that the user did happen to forget their password, right? They forgot it. At the bottom of the screen, you could see I can hit the escape key here. So if I hit escape, I'm automatically going to go to the recovery screen. Now, what we're looking for, what's important here to notice, is the recovery key ID. Notice it starts with 9378. So when I go back to get my recovery key from wherever this happens to be, I want to match this up and make sure that I have the right recovery information. So I'll flip back over to the background window here, and there it is, 9378. If you want to go any further, obviously you can do that. But just to verify that I'm not getting the incorrect copy of the key. Now this is the key that you would type in right down here, this 48-character password, in order to recover that machine. Unfortunately, I can't copy and paste between these two different devices, so I would have to manually type that in. So that's in general what we end up doing, and then be able to restart the machine. Now, if we do this recovery key, this is only good for one reboot. So in this case, again, there's that key at the bottom of the screen. If I type that in here, again, it's only good for this one time. Once we get into the system, what we probably want to do is verify what happened with that user's installation. Did they just forget or lose their key? Did they forget their password? In any case, what we might want to do after that is we might want to go back and reset their password at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reset this machine. Just going to reset it, reboot it. I'll type in the proper password at this point, because I do happen to know what the password is for it. Get the drive decrypted, and then we can go back into the system and look at the settings again that we want to modify once we're back into the system. So normal boot process is happening right now.
Here we go, we're rebooting.
Log back in as normal. And again, if this is a situation where the user forgot whatever their password happened to be, or they forgot their USB stick, what we need to do is go basically recreate that for them. And that can be accomplished directly through the Explorer environment here. Go to my C drive, right click on the drive, You have your manage Bitlocker right here. There's change your password. So if you wanted to implement a new one there, or again, manage it, then you've got other options directly from here. So you can back up your recovery key here, and so, or change your password. This way the user will be able to get back into the drive without needing to be unlocked. So as I say, Bitlocker is a great example of protecting your drive, your content, your operating systems, your application data, and it's a secure way to make sure that everything stays integrated into a secured environment. So, thanks for watching.
Okay, yeah, that was pretty good. So that's pretty much File Vault.
Now let's take a look at one of the next processes that happen. After a successful boot, the logon process is going to be the next possible outcome. Once the logon screen appears, the user is going to want to authenticate, get logged onto the system, get to their desktop, and start working. So let's take a moment and talk about the authentication process in Windows 10. Now it's a little bit more diverse than we've seen in previous operating systems, because now in Windows 10, we've got more account types than ever to be authenticated. We've got our local accounts, of course, on a local SAM database, which you can still authenticate to locally. You have your domain-based accounts, which are going to be ones you authenticate through a domain controller.
I want to know
about that. You've got the Microsoft accounts, your cloud-based ones, especially if you've got Office 365.
That's what I'm rusty on.
And then you also have an Azure-based account. So if your organization has moved into the cloud and you've got things set up through an Azure directory environment, so we've got 4 different kinds of accounts to authenticate. And those are all going to different locations and different databases to authenticate against. Now, the process of authentication is just where we validate our credentials. Either it's a username and a password, or if we've got a situation where we're using multiple factor authentication, or MFA, we might also have to use an additional type of mechanism, maybe like your phone, to receive a phone call or to get a text message from the provider to validate you are in fact that entity or that person trying to log in. Once the authentication process happens, of course, then we should be able to get to our desktop and get to work. Now, in a domain environment, of course, our client has to find a domain controller first. So primarily, that's a DNS resolution process looking specifically for the service records that will find the domain controller and therefore be able to send the authentication request directly over to the domain controller for authentication purpose. In other videos, we're also going to talk about the problems that might arise with the authentication process. And we'll have a couple different examples of what may happen in a domain-based environment. In addition, Windows 10 gives us the opportunity to link multiple kinds of authentications together. As an example, you could have a domain-based device which will authenticate to your domain controller and piggyback off of that a Microsoft account for access to things like the Windows Store, which is now part of the Windows 10 environment, so you can download apps from that particular environment. So we've got many different opportunities for the authentication process. And so Windows 10 is a much more diverse OS than we've ever seen before.
Okay. Resolving broken trust issues. I wish it was that simple.
We've just got a user who's contacted us saying they're not able to log into their computer. They're pretty sure their password and their username and combination is correct. So let's take a look and see what the issue might be relating to this particular logon scenario. So as we can see, the user has tried logging in. So we'll put in the user's credentials one more time. And in this case, we see there's an error that comes up saying that we don't have either a computer account or this trust relationship. Now, this situation could have come about through a variety of reasons. One could be some kind of a corruption on the local machine. It might be due to malware, a virus. On the back end, on the server side, it could have been something to deal with the computer account itself specifically. Maybe the computer account got reset accidentally. Potentially, the account might have gotten deleted. in this case, and somebody decided to recreate that account as opposed to restoring it from the Active Directory tools we've got available. So in any one of those situations, it could have broken that trust. Now, the trust relationship, of course, is a secure channel that's used to define the ownership of this device as part of the domain, and there's a password that's set between the domain controller and the client machine, and those have to be synced up. Another situation that might cause a problem with the trust relationship is if we had to go back and do a restore point that was far back in the timeline of
time for a
available
refresher
options
course
for the client. If we go back past, say, 30 days for a restore point, odds are pretty good you're going to be past that window when the secure password gets reset and updated between the domain controller and the client machine. So that could also break that trust relationship. I've seen that happen before. Sometimes in antivirus removal, some of the tools could corrupt that computer account information as well. So a variety of scenarios could come about where could cause a problem with this particular situation. Now, it's very important for us to have an option in order to log in locally to this machine. So very important that we've got at least an admin local account to get into the system. Otherwise, we'll have very difficult times ahead of us in trying to get in and fix this particular situation. So what we need to do here is log in with a local account and be able to take this machine basically out of the domain and then re-add it in to build a brand new connection between the client and the domain controller, and therefore we'll have a secure trust again. So what we'll do, we're going to have to log on as a local account.
So that's an additional admin user. Oh, thank you, Jay. Jaden, thank you so much. Thank you. You're so nice. All right, Jaden, I'm gonna.
Once we're in here, we're going to get into our system properties, and then take care of taking this machine out of the domain and then rejoining it, which will again reestablish that trust between the client and the workstation.
So how do you access the domain? File manager, this PC, properties.
So we can pick any one of the choices here, system protection, just to get into our system properties. This is what we're looking for.
Protection.
And the tab we want to go to is the computer name tab. And under the right side, we've got the ability to change, rename, and its domain or worker appear. So I'm currently part of the Aeromar domain. I'm going to just join workgroup for the time being. I might have to put in some credentials here to allow me to leave the domain as the user account was the one that was used to log on to the system. So now I'll have to use the domain administrator access to do this. Now I should get confirmation that I have joined the work group at this point. Now once I close this out, what it's going to do is say that I should reboot the computer. We can follow that through, although again, in the service desk environment, we're trying to do whatever we can to try to minimize that time that the user's not productive. So while it would say that I should reboot the machine, I'm going to stay right here, and I'm going to go right back into this control panel and then rejoin the domain from here. I have the opportunity to select it.
Okay.
So now I'm going to put my domain name again and hit OK. And I should see the authentication box again as needed, elevated privileges to rejoin the domain.
Reconnecting the computer with all the files and everything. Okay, that's smart. Good for you! Yay! You want a cookie?
Here's my confirmation. Say
what
welcome to the Aeromar domain. So now, to fully complete this process, I do need to reboot this machine. So I'll get one more prompt at this point. I'll restart now. And once this comes back up, we should have a reestablished trust relationship between the machine and the domain. Now, we talked about authentication previously, and we mentioned the user account and the password. Now we're also seeing that, yes, because this machine is part of the domain, it also has an authentication process that it goes through, because we'll have things like group policies that will run in order to configure certain things within the machine environment. And in upcoming videos, we're going to talk about issues that might surround group policies and how to resolve those as well. So while we're waiting for our logon process here, again, a large number of things can cause some issues with the authentication process, not only the user account itself or the actual machine account too. So I'm going to try to log back in as the user at this point.
All right, so now it's on the domain. Is it relinked? Yeah, because it was on
And
the
as
domain.
you can see, we got to the desktop, which means that we now have a successful trust relationship reboot.
What? What happened to the audio?
As far as the authentication process goes, we've got to have successful communications with a variety of services, primarily domain controllers, Active Directory. Also, we'll need to talk to DNS servers. Both of those are integrated into the authentication process. Now, if we're looking at authentication, we should talk a little bit about what are some problems that might have on the user side as far as the accounts go specifically. What are some issues that might cause a problem with authentication overall in a domain environment? Well, most commonly, we could have users improperly typing a password in, right? Most organizations will have a process in which they'll allow a few incorrect passwords to be typed in before the account usually gets locked out. Industry averages, and most clients I've talked to have been somewhere between 3 to 5. I've seen as many as 10 in some situations, but averages are somewhere between 3 to 5 invalid logon attempts before what happens? The user account gets locked out, and then at that point, the user would have to call us in the service desk. We'd check their account and then unlock it, maybe reassign them a new password, a temporary password, so that they can log in and then reset a new password for themselves. Now, other things that might come about would be maybe their account's expired. Sometimes you have contractors or temp employees, and when we create those accounts, we'll generally set a specific end date. Maybe it's 30 or 60 or 90 days in the future based upon a contract or an expected time frame, which they'll be attached to the organization. Another scenario that might cause a problem is if you have any applications that are using cached passwords as well, and you end up changing your password in the Windows environment, but your application that you have, let's say it's an email app, is still using your old credentials. Well, due to that